At 2 a.m. local time, the uneasy silence of the Middle East was shattered once again. In a massive coordinated operation, U.S. Central Command has launched a wave of precision airstrikes against over 80 targets in Iraq and Syria. The target? The command centers of militias directly funded by Tehran. Washington calls it defensive. Tehran calls it an act of war. With Iranian leadership facing historic protests at home and a renewed maximum pressure campaign from abroad, the shadow war is moving into the light. We are no longer asking if the conflict will escalate. We are asking, has the point of no return already been crossed? To understand why these strikes happened tonight, we have to look at the last 72 hours. While the world's eyes were fixed on the civil unrest in Tehran, Iran's regional proxies went on the offensive. A swarm of one-way attack drones targeted a logistics hub used by American forces near the Jordanian border. For the White House, this was a red line. The American intelligence community believes this attack wasn't random. It was a calculated distraction, an attempt by a cornered Iranian regime to project strength while facing its worst internal crisis in decades. But the American response was not just about revenge, it was a message. By targeting specific guidance systems and logistics hubs, the US is trying to blind the enemy before a potential larger conflict begins. This cycle of violence didn't start this week. It is a wound that has been festering for nearly 50 years. It began in 1979, when the Islamic Revolution toppled the US-backed Shah, turning close allies into bitter enemies. Since then, the two nations have been locked in a gray zone conflict, fighting through sanctions, cyber attacks, and proxy militias. But the rules of the game changed in 2025. Following the collapse of diplomatic back channels, the region witnessed Operation Midnight Hammer last June, the 12-day conflict where US and Israeli forces struck key Iranian nuclear infrastructure. Tehran promised vengeance. Washington promised containment. Instead of backing down, Iran accelerated its missile program and tightened its grip on the Strait of Hormuz. The strikes we saw today are simply the latest chapter in a war that has been fought in the shadows for half a century. So where do we stand right now? Geopolitically, the board is set for a checkmate. The United States has redeployed the USS Abraham Lincoln carrier strike group to the Arabian Sea, a clear signal of force. But the real variable is inside Iran. Since December, the regime has been battling massive anti-government protests. The currency is in freefall. The internet is blacked out. This makes the situation incredibly dangerous. History tells us that fragile regimes often start foreign wars to unite their people. Regional powers are scrambling. Israel is pushing for a broader strike to finish what was started in 2025. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states are urging caution, knowing their oil refineries are the first targets in an all-out war. And watching silently from the sidelines, China and Russia. Both have deepened ties with Tehran, and both would benefit from the US getting bogged down in another Middle Eastern quagmire. But what happens if the Cold War turns hot? What does a full-scale US-Iran war actually look like for you? It starts at the gas pump. Roughly 30% of the world's seaborne oil passes through the Strait of Hormuz. Iran has threatened to mine this waterway if attacked. Energy analysts predict that a closure of the strait could send oil prices skyrocketing past $150 a barrel overnight. This isn't just about expensive petrol, it's about the global economy. High energy costs drive up the price of food, shipping, and manufacturing. A conflict here could trigger a global recession that would touch every household from London to Tokyo to New York. And militarily, it wouldn't be an invasion like Iraq. It would be an air and sea war of devastating scale, with Iranian ballistic missiles targeting US bases across the Gulf, and US air power attempting to dismantle an entire nation's military infrastructure. We are standing on a precipice. The US strikes today were tactical, precise, limited, and designed to deter. But in the fog of war, limited actions often have unlimited consequences. One miscalculation, one stray missile, or one desperate move by a regime fearing for its survival could ignite the powder keg. War is not inevitable. Diplomacy, however faint, still has a pulse. But as the carrier groups move into position and the rhetoric heats up, the window for talking is closing fast. For now, the world holds its breath, waiting to see if the next sunrise brings a ceasefire or a firestorm.